Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of GeoPod. I'm your host, Dylan Woods, and on today's episode we're going to discuss the recent bilateral talks, or the initiation rather, of the bilateral talks between Russia and the United States in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. High-profile talks anticipated for quite a long time between Russia and the United States regarding the ongoing war within Ukraine and the possible solution to said war. So obviously this has been in the news quite extensively the past few days. There's been a lot of assumptions, a lot of doom thinking, a lot of controversial statements, let's say, from certain figures within the political landscape. So I just thought I want to do a video to just discuss what these conversations constitute, what to look out for, what Russia wants, and what the possible ramifications of any potential concessions will be. So let's start off with, what does Russia want from these negotiations? I mean, obviously the war in Ukraine has been going on for quite some years now, and never before have they been willing to even think about entering into any sort of negotiations, especially not with the Biden administration, any European nation, or Ukraine for that matter. However, now, roughly 1 month into Trump's administration, they seem quite eager to enter talks and to sit around the table with envoys from the United States of America. Now, why is that? And what do they want from these negotiations? Well, what they want out of these negotiations has become already quite apparent by the topics and subject matters that have been discussed yesterday. Ironically, the war in Ukraine seemed not to be on the agenda at all. And mostly what was discussed were potential economic prospects, matters of cooperation even, within the economical sphere, which is very telling given the fact that obviously Russia's economy is suffering because of the harsh sanctioning it suffered over the course of these past few years. It needs economic relief. It needs economic relief to sustain its war effort in Ukraine and to keep keep its war machine going at the rate that it's currently going. So they need some new incentive. They need some new surge into their economy. And what better way than to do that than make deals with the greatest superpower in the world, the United States of America, Donald Trump, which is at heart a businessman, an economist, one who has economy on a very high priority. So what Russia wants to manipulate the United States into appeasement. Russia wants to loosen the collar around their neck, let's say. Now, and this is a very important thing to note, Trump has praised himself as the one that has brought Russia to the negotiating table. He had succeeded where all others before him has failed. However, he fails to understand a very inconvenient truth, and that is the fact that he did not choose Russia. Russia chose him. Putin chose to send a delegation to Riyadh because he deems Trump to be most susceptible to his agenda. That's why Russia is entering in these negotiations. It isn't to end the war in Ukraine. It isn't to usher in a new age of reforms and revolution. No, it is to manipulate, it is to scheme, it is to prolongate, and it is to deceive. And Trump has proven, at least in his rhetoric, to be very susceptible to the agenda of the Russians, in particularly to statements made by Putin and his defense minister Lavrov. So what Russia wants out of these negotiations is a better position all around. It wants to alleviate economic pressure. It wants to maybe enforce a temporary ceasefire that will allow it the time to regenerate its war machine and making it ready and better geared up to enter round 2. It wants time. It wants to buy time, and it wants to buy relief. And Trump so far, at least in his rhetoric, seems to be incredibly susceptible to that message. Now, oftentimes in politics, rhetoric that is spoken out loud and words spoken behind closed doors are two entirely different things, especially when it comes down to Donald Trump. However, based upon his rhetoric and the statement he made in recent days, you must draw the conclusion that it seems, as of this moment in time, Trump hasn't quite got a clear notion of what he's up against. And that brings me to my next point. I've said before that no, you didn't get Russia at the negotiating table. Russia chose you as a champion of their cause, let's say, as a soundboard for their agenda, because they deem you to be the most susceptible to their message. They believe that their route to victory is the easiest if it goes through you, making you a mere puppet rather than an equal partner in negotiations. And what this says is that Putin understands Trump better than the other way around. And let me explain to you why that is. Over the course of the past 2 decades, Putin's bread and butter has been the manipulation and puppeteering of oligarchs in order to sponsor his government and rule. Trump is very similar in terms of his ideology, his perceptions, and his agenda to said oligarchs. Trump is nothing new to Putin. He's exactly the same as all the others Putin had to manipulate, turn to his cause, sway to his cause, in order to install and expand his power throughout Russia. Trump is a businessman. Trump's main priority is economic balance and fortuity. And he runs the government as such. Now obviously this comes with a lot of pros. But it comes with a lot of risks and perils as well, especially in the geopolitical sphere. Because politics is much more than mere economic balance. And this is where Trump struggles the most. He sees in every opponent a pragmatist, a practical economist, let's say. The problem is that Putin is neither. Putin is an ideologist, one who is very set in his beliefs and agenda. One who is more than eager to let his country and countrymen suffer in pursuit of that ideology. And I do not believe that Trump truly grasped the depth of such an ideology. And I'm not sure if he's the right person to combat it. Obviously, like I said before, a lot of assumptions are being made. A lot of doom thinking is taking place, especially within the European political spheres. Trump is going to appease Putin. Trump is going to appease Russia. He may not. As I've said before, rhetoric spoken out loud and words spoken behind closed doors are often two different things in politics. As far as Europe is concerned, the best advice to give at this point in time is take a step back, let it occur, let it transpire, but stand ready for anything. Be ready to act the moment that indeed Trump seems willing to appease Russia, bolstering its economy and making it more resilient in its efforts to prolongate their campaign within Ukraine. So that brings us to my last point of this clip. And that is, what will the possible ramifications be of any concessions or appeasement made towards Russia by the United States? First and foremost, it's important to note that neither Europe nor Ukraine is part of these negotiations. Meaning that the United States and Russia can agree to anything, but that doesn't mean it will have a direct effect on Ukraine. Ukraine needs to make a stand. Ukraine needs to make statements, counter offers, anything in order to protect their own agenda and security. That being said, if the United States were, for example, to appease Russia economically and even enter partnerships with them economically, it will obviously boost Russia's economy, making it more able to persist in its war efforts, making it more able to not just keep up their current rate of production, but expand upon it, making their military machine more efficient and thereby stand as a greater threat, not towards Ukraine, but towards the entirety of Europe in general. So obviously that is something that Europe wants to avoid at all costs. And even if it were to occur, Europe needs to be ready to boost its own defense industrial base, to do whatever it takes to meet Russia's military developments head on. Another possible ramification of any concessions or appeasement is that will embolden Russia further, meaning they might not just ramp up their campaign in Ukraine, but they might even initiate another campaign targeting perhaps one of NATO's member states. Now, obviously, that would escalate the war significantly, and obviously, then NATO must look towards Article 5 in order to ensure its own survival and its own security. And what the United States will do in that regard, well, that remains to be seen. Trump seems to believe that Putin wishes nothing but to bring this war to a swift conclusion. And logically, he is not wrong. An end to the war would be good for Russia. It would mean more economic prosperity for Russia. It would provide Russia with the ability to regenerate, to bolster its military forces and capabilities and resources. And it's not out of this world to think that at least a temporary ceasefire might be achieved here. But it will be achieved for the wrong reasons. Now Trump will laud the trumpet of victory. Look, I have been able to mediate a ceasefire where all the others have failed. But it will not change Russia's ambitions on the long term. And it will only serve to bolster their capabilities, both economically, politically, and militarily. Obviously, in any war, in any negotiations regarding armed conflict, there are concessions to be made. And I'm sure that if at one point in time a real agreement between Ukraine and Russia takes place, Ukraine needs to concede to a certain degree. However, the United States, NATO, Europe, and Ukraine must ensure that it will be on the most favorable terms for the West in regards to Putin. You must negotiate from a position of strength, not from a position of appeasement. Putin is a tyrant. He will not cease until he gets what he wants. And even if he's being allowed to keep just a tiny bit of land he has conquered within Ukraine, it will already stand as a victory to his agenda, because he succeeded in expanding the borders of his great motherland, which is what this is all about. What Trump will also quickly find out is that any appeasement, any concessions he makes towards Russia will stand in direct confrontation with his other foreign policies, in particularly those geared towards Iran, North Korea, and China. A strong Russia means a stronger Iran, a stronger North Korea, and a stronger China. A weak Russia means a weaker Iran, a weaker North Korea, and a weaker China. Russia is part of a bloc that is expanding, a bloc that is set to counter not just NATO, but the entire notion of the Western world and the pillars upon which it was built. And once again, based upon his rhetoric, I am not sure if Trump truly understands and grasps the severity of such an ideology and fathoms exactly what he is up against. I will be looking attentively towards the developments going on in Riyadh. As I said before, a lot of what we can do right now is based on assumption and rhetoric. And I will repeat again, rhetoric spoken out loud and words spoken beyond closed doors are two different things. But if Europe is smart, it stands ready for any eventuality and is ready to step up should the need arise. This is all I want to share with you today. If you have any comments or questions for me, please feel free to reach out to me on YouTube or on one of my social media platforms. I aim to disseminate more content to you guys in the near future. I will be following the negotiations in Riyadh attentively, and if any concrete developments do occur, I'll be sure to treat them and discuss them on this channel. I thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this clip, and I hope to see you all again next time. Thank you very much, and have a blessed day. Thank you.